Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1998 comedy Ernest in the Army. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Brock for requesting this review, as well as reviews of the entire Ernest series. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both will be in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Ernest in the Army is the last film in the Ernest franchise, and contrary to some rumors, there was no Ernest pirate movie that was planned at any point. That was actually a separate project that John Cherry was working on and was doing pre-production on, called Pirates of the Plane. And Jim Varney expressed interest in playing the main pirate role and not doing it as Ernest, just playing an original character. And John was willing to do that, but Jim's health was in really bad shape, so he wasn't able to do the film. So he was replaced by Tim Curry, and the film did ultimately get released, but there was no Ernest pirate film. That's just a rumor. This is the last Ernest movie. There was a concept that was thrown around called Ernest and Son, and it was going to be about Ernest and his son, or somebody who was going to take over and carry the torch or carry the plunger, so to speak. But that never got off the ground. And Ernest in the Army, I'm not going to sit here and say that this is a classic or it's underrated or it's a great movie, but I think it should get a little more accolades, or at least a little bit more credit, than something like Ernest Goes to Africa or Slam Dunk Ernest or Ernest Goes to School. Like, I think it's a much better movie than those three. And that's not a very high bar. I get that. But I still feel that for the most part, even despite some issues, this film ends the Ernest franchise on a bit of a high note. Not a full high note, but it's definitely partly there. And I think it's because its heart is in the right place. Even though the tone is off when it comes to the script, it still has this really nice feel to it in terms of its approach to Ernest and his character and so on. It just feels like more of a return to form when it comes to the way that Ernest is portrayed and the way that Ernest is written. And I think a good reason for that is because John Cherry, he got up for this film, because I feel that he knew that this could be the last one, and I feel he wanted to end things on the highest note he possibly could, and he didn't want to do an Ernest movie where he's just kind of going through the motions again, just picking up a paycheck as a director. I really feel that he wanted to really go out there, give it his best, give it everything he has, because this is going to be the end. And I think he realized that while he was in the middle of shooting, because of the fact that Jim was just in such poor health. Years of smoking and hard living caught up to him, and he was dealing with the effects of lung cancer and other complications, and he could barely finish a day's shoot. He was a trooper. He gave it everything that he had, but that would just make him very tired, and so he would end up going home early, or he wasn't really able to do as long of a shoot. So there were a lot of things that John Cherry, I feel, really realized while shooting this film, where he's like, oh, my friend is not doing that well. He probably doesn't have that long. this is more than likely going to be it. So I want to give it everything that I have because I know that he's doing that, and I don't want to just be here, collect a paycheck. This is more than just a job here. This is something bigger. And I think what also helped John Cherry's direction improve with this film is because of the fact that I do feel that he was also way more passionate about this story and about this concept because he's a Vietnam vet. And on top of that, he gets to act in the film. And what's crazy is he only acted in the film because they couldn't find somebody with a southern accent in South Africa to cast in the film, so they brought him on board. And I I feel that that just added an extra incentive for John. He doesn't want to direct himself in a way where it looks lazy and kind of half-assed, and he doesn't want to do that in what could be Jim Varney's last appearance as Ernest. So the two things combined, plus the fact that it's about Ernest in the Army and a military film, which is something that definitely speaks to him, it led to an uptick in direction in terms of the quality. Like I think the direction in this, it's not amazing or spectacular, but for the kind of film that it is, I think it works rather well. I think he did a good job hiding Barney's poor health. What's funny is I thought he was more noticeably lethargic in the previous film versus his performance in this. And that just speaks to how well John was able to shoot the film and kind of work around Varney's declining health. And he also injected more energy, more vitality, more of that signature, wacky, fun electricity that a lot of these other Ernest films had. And it adds to a lot of the slapstick. It adds to a lot of the sequences that are being a little bit more madcap and a little bit more silly. And overall, yeah, I think John Cherry did a good job directing this. And I think that this is more of a look at the kind of direction that he's capable of when he really commits himself, when he really is trying. And he also wasn't really involved in the script this time. He came up with a story, but it was Joseph Dottori and Jeff Pillars who wrote the script. I think that also helped because you had two different writers who were working on the movie this time around. It's not just the same guy. He's not doing double duty here and spreading himself too thin. I will say this about the script. While it's not a bad concept of Ernest joining the army and getting involved in military pratfalls and so on, and having to stop a terrorist from launching a missile, it is a script that has some tone issues that are pretty glaring. There's this whole opening narration with this Middle Eastern prisoner of war. He's talking about this warrior who's gonna arrive at some point and save them, and it's so cliched. And honestly, I I will say it's a bit off when it comes to its representation of the culture and Middle Eastern people and so on. A little too overly simplified, almost cartoonish in a way about the white savior who's going to come in and save them. You know, that kind of thing. This is a little off, and there's a lot of seriousness in this script at times with the prisoners of war, with the bad guys, with the news broadcasts. And so what you have is like Ernest and doing his Ernest shtick, but then you have like other aspects of the script that are just way too serious and way too played straight. So it leads to some significant issues in terms of the tone when it comes to the consistency of the tone throughout the story. And I do blame the screenwriters for that. The villains here, they try to portray them as goofy and not much of a threat, but the way that they do it just comes across as forced or it's just really bad. Like the Tafuti guy, who is the head of this rival nation or faction who's trying to launch a missile. Uh, for some reason, the screenwriters think it's hilarious that he's obsessed with golf. He's golfing in almost every scene. He's got a golf club. He's making golf puns. I'm like, what is so funny about this? Oh, he likes golf. Okay, is that funny though? Is it funny just because this guy likes golf? I just don't get it. I don't understand the obsession with golf. Also, there's this sort of love story angle going on with Ernest and this reporter lady that doesn't really go anywhere. Although I think the two performers, Jim Varney and the actress who played the reporter, they had a good rapport with one another, but it doesn't really feel like there's really any romantic tension between these two. And despite the fact that Ernest has got a crush on her. And the military stuff, a lot of it's pretty predictable, kind of been there, done that. Um but it works all right. I mean, there are some moments that are pretty creative, like the scene where Ernest is cooking and he's making pancakes and he's cutting corners and he puts uh stuff that's supposed to like cover up holes in a tank and then puts it into the baking mix so that when he's handing pancakes to people they weigh a ton like that, and then he uses the pancakes later in combat when he's fighting Tafuti. I thought that was clever. And there's just a few other bits here and there that have some clever bits of writing in terms of Ernest using his dumb wits to somehow, some way find a way out of a certain situation in like the dumbest way imaginable. Like an idiot savant, that kind of thing. And I do feel that the way that the character that Ernest is friends with, who's played by John Cherry. Like I feel that Ben and Ernest, they have this really nice, sweet friendship together. Like you buy that they're really good pals, really good friends, and Ernest's whole reason of joining the army, it's silly and really dumb, but it fits so well for Ernest. Like he would be the type that would be like, I get to drive the big army trucks, like he's that kind of guy. So it makes sense that he would be like, "Oh, I'll join the army reserves just so I can drive the trucks." And yeah, if it wasn't for this other stuff like with the character who's yeah, Ben Ali, the lost boy who he's only lost because his dad is a prisoner of war. That whole angle with him and his dad and the narration is just awkward. And then what's also awkward is there's a lot of moments in the script where the story just kind of stops so you can play a news broadcast from some fictional news studio. And I get why it's there to establish a motivation for the reporter. But yeah, it definitely does affect the pacing of the film at times. But I understand what they're trying to do with Cindy Swanson, or what they're trying to do with the guy who's the head of the I'm not gonna say, yeah, he's a UN peacekeeping commander, Gullet. I get what they're trying to do with him, make him some kind of surprise villain, but the guy acts like a villain before it's even revealed that he's a villain. So it's one of those characters that when the twist happens, It's not at all shocking. So yeah, it is what it is with him. I honestly had more fun with the stuff involving General Lincoln and his aide and the back and forth with those two than anything with Gullet and Ernest or even like the other military members who are part of the Army Reserve team that's sent to the Middle East to initially help with the peacekeeping thing, but then it turns into a conflict. And yeah, there's a lot of daffy stuff in this, but it just feels a little more consistent too in terms of the kind of silliness that you see. Like you get some dream sequences here and there, but it's not like Ernest goes to school where all of a sudden the teacher is able to eat flies with a frog tongue, or there's David Keith as a cowboy in the hall, and he's a ghost for some reason, and he gives Ernest a hall pass. Like you don't get that kind of stuff. So it's silly and daffy at times, but like not to that level of inconsistency. So I want to give this script some credit for that. Um, but yeah, not what I would consider to be a top notch, top flight, terrific script by any means. But for an Ernest film and for a movie where it's just the main selling point is Ernest in the Army, it's not a bad script for what it is. I think there's a defined conflict. You understand why Ernest joins the army. When Ernest is in the Army Reserves, there's some fun scenes where he's just being earnest and being a total goofball with a heart of gold. The film features some other technical aspects, but they're not really anything that's really noticeable in terms of their quality, good or bad. Like the editing by Craig Bassett and Virgil Da Silva, or the cinematography by Jimmy Robb. The music by Mark Adler, another one of those things where you hear it and then it's in one ear, out the other. Not really anything that special. The cast, other than Jim Varney and John Cherry and Hayley Tyson, I'll give Hayley Tyson credit as Cindy Swanson. The cast is mediocre. Definitely a mixed bag of performers in more ways than one. I mean, Jim Varney, yes, there are some moments where you can kind of tell that he's more tired and doesn't have the same energy. But there's other moments where it seems like he still got it. And it makes this performance honestly a little more impressive, considering the fact that that he was not doing well at this time, and he would pass away. I believe he passed away in 2000. So yeah, he passed away in February of 2000, and this was shot in 90, 96, and 97, and then was released on video in 98. So yeah, it's honestly something that I feel doesn't get enough credit, that Jim was still able to tap into a lot of that mirth and a lot of that energy in a way that still seemed believable, despite the fact that his energy was waning and he was dying, because that's really what was happening. He was dying. Um, and that does add a little extra tinge of sadness to this film, to be honest, because of the fact that he was not doing well and then he would pass away soon after. But I think, for the swan song, so to speak, of this character, I think it was a respectable job, well done by Jim Varney. He did the best that he possibly could, considering the circumstances. Uh, Hayley Tyson as Cindy Swanson. I thought she had some good fire to her, some good back and forth, good rapport with Jim Varney. in the scenes that they were in. David Muller is Pierre Gullet. Pretty forgettable performance. A lot of it, I think, was just him having an attitude and always looking like he smelled a fart, and that's really about it. Uh, Christo Davids as Ben Ali, the lost boy who befriends Ernest. You know, not what I would consider a masterclass of acting for a child actor, but it was fine. It was fine for that role. Jeff Pillars and Duke Ernsberger. It was fun to see those two again. They were the vacuum salesman in Ernest Rides Again, and they still have a good amount of chemistry with one another. I would say some of the funnier scenes are definitely between those two. And you also have Ivan Lucas who plays the villain, Habib Tafuti. It was all right, I guess. Like I never bought the guy as an intimidating villain, but I think that's kind of the point. Um, but I didn't find him to be that funny either because so much of his shtick is just golf jokes. And John Cherry, he was Sergeant Ben in this, and I thought John Cherry was good for the little role that he had. I thought he had a decent screen presence. I thought that he had some really nice rapport and scenes where he had a genuine connection with Jim, and that's because they were really good friends, and you saw that on screen, and it added a nice little extra bit of energy to the film, and and liveliness, and yeah, it just seemed like two good friends just hanging out on the shoot, and it really did add a lot of authenticity to the film, and it was just fun to see. It was fun to see John Cherry act alongside his friend Jim. Now, the film is only like 85 minutes, and I know some people pointed out where it feels like it's twice as long. I don't really feel that way. It's like 85 minutes, and I think it goes by at a decent enough pace, and before you know it, it's over. And it's just that kind of film where, yeah, it's not going to win any awards, but none of the other Ernest films really like that, even the best ones. And it's also a movie that, yeah, it's not the funniest comedy out there, but you can get some chuckles, you can get a few laughs here and there, and I keep repeating this, but I think it really does fit when it comes to this movie. It just has a good heart to it, and that carries it a decent amount of time. It carries the film a little bit of the way, not entirely across the finish line because it's not one of those movies that's a classic. But I definitely do feel that it's a little bit better than a 4.4 on IMDb or its rotten rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And I would say if you like these kind of army comedies, it's definitely one to maybe put on one of these days. I mean, I don't think it's on the same level as Private Benjamin or even In the Army now with Pauly Shore, but it's still a fun watch for what it is, but not something that you want to watch again. It's that kind of thing where it's just borderline average, but it's not quite two time waster territory. So it's not quite the 3 stars because there's not enough elements that are really great or really good that make it get to that point. But there's enough there that it's tolerable. It's okay. It's watchable. That's a lot more than I can say about some of the other awful, just cringe-inducing films in this franchise. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Ernest in the Army, and until next time, I'll see you later.